All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're looking at a piece of writing that's less of a story and more of a deep, deep dive into the nature of, well, us. It asks a pretty fundamental question. What is actually left when you strip away everything you think you are?
And we start with this line, wow. It just pulls you right in, doesn't it? It talks about this little gap, this tiny moment that's so hard to grasp, you can only find it by accident, by falling through. And that's really what this whole thing is about, the attempt to just stand in that gap, not to analyze it, but to be there.
And there it is, the main idea in just 5 words. See, most of us try to figure ourselves out by adding things, more knowledge, more experiences, more labels. Our narrator does the exact opposite. He embarks on a journey of taking things away, of peeling back layer after layer to see if there's anything at all at the center.
So, where does a journey like this even begin? Well, like a lot of really profound ideas, it starts way back in childhood. It kicks off with a simple question. How do you learn about what's real by removing things instead of adding them?
This is just brilliant. It's not some kind of magic trick, it's a realization. He figured out that the world, especially the world of adults, is basically trained to ignore stillness. By sitting perfectly still, he learns that real presence isn't about making a fuss and being seen, it's about pure being. He was actually more there than he'd ever been before.
And that little discovery as a kid, it kind of snowballs into the central metaphor for this whole thing, which, again, comes from this really powerful and kind of strange memory.
I mean, just picture this in your mind. A window. Its whole job is to let you see out into the world. But this one, it just looks at a brick wall. That's it. It's this weird little quirk of the house, but for our narrator, it becomes his first and maybe his most important teacher. He would just sit there for hours, just taking in the weirdness of it and opening onto pure nothing.
And that's the lesson. It's so profound. The window wasn't there to show him a beautiful view. It was there to show him nothing. And in doing that, it revealed that the state of being open doesn't actually depend on what you're open to. Openness is a quality all by itself.
And that brings us to the key concept, the big idea of this whole explainer, the aperture. It's what our narrator calls this fundamental openness. It's not something you have, it's what you are. You can think of it like the screen at a movie theater. It's the space where the whole movie of your life, every thought, every feeling, even your sense of being you, gets projected.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds a little mystical, a little out there, right? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The text draws this brilliant parallel, arguing that 2 completely different fields, science and mysticism, are basically walking the same path to the exact same mystery.
Just look at this side by side. It's incredible. On one hand, you have neuroscience, meticulously mapping out every corner of the brain. But it always hits this wall, what they call the hard problem. Okay, you've mapped everything, but who or what is actually having the experience? There's this huge gap. Then, on the other hand, you have the mystic, who looks inward for the self, for the looker, and by saying, I'm not this, I'm not that, they find nothing. Both roads lead to a kind of emptiness.
And in fact, the narrator kind of jokes that the entire field of consciousness science has really only produced one solid, robust finding so far, that absolutely no one has any idea what consciousness is.
So if thinking about it and mapping it out can only get you so far, what's the next step? Well, this brings us to the really practical part of the journey, where our narrator learns an actual method for experiencing this aperture firsthand.
This is where he meets a woman named Lira. And the description is just perfect. She has eyes the color of the window in my childhood home, the color of looking at nothing. She's the one who guides him, who takes him from the world of just thinking about this stuff to the world of direct practice.
And this is Lira's core teaching, and it's a real mind-bender. The whole point isn't to see some big final truth. In fact, the moment you grab onto an idea, the second you think, aha, I finally get it, that's the very thing that slams the aperture shut. The practice is just about staying open, about stopping the effort to see and just starting to be. So her practice is this wild, recursive loop. First, you look for the one who's looking. You try to find the you that's paying attention, and you find nothing there. But, and here's the absolute key, you don't stop. Then you turn your attention around and look for the one who just found nothing. And you find nothing there either. You just keep turning and turning and turning. Every step just dissolves the one that came before it. So where does all this relentless turning and looking lead? Well, it leads to the story's climax, which is this huge fundamental shift in the very fabric of his perception.
You know, his whole life, he felt like he was a person in the audience, watching the movie of his life play out on screen. After this practice, he realizes he's not the audience. He's not even the characters on the screen. He is the light coming from the projector. He's the raw awareness that makes the whole show possible in the first place.
Which, of course, brings us to the central brain-breaking question. If the narrator, the I at the center of the story, has been shown to be a kind of illusion, then who is telling us all of this? Who's writing these words?
And the answer is a total paradox. There is no author. The story is just happening. The writing is writing itself. It's just an expression of the aperture, a story without a storyteller. And that's a concept that both mystics and, in their own way, neuroscientists are starting to grapple with.
Okay, so what now? If your sense of self dissolves, what does getting up and making coffee in the morning look like? This brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial stage of this whole journey: integration.
Integration isn't about floating off into the cosmos. It's about diving deeper into life. It's not about breaking out of the prison. It's about realizing the prison walls were just painted on the open sky the entire time. You still live your life, you still have a name, you still have a personality, but you know deep down it's a role you're playing, a temporary shape that this vast openness has decided to take.
The story wraps up with one last absolutely beautiful metaphor. In the archive where Lira works, they find this locked box labeled Aperture. Nobody can get it open. They try everything. Then one day, it's just open by itself. And inside, there's nothing, just empty space and a single tiny piece of paper.
And this is the final, perfect paradox that leaves us hanging. The note says this fundamental openness you are is thankful you remembered it, while also saying it doesn't need to be remembered at all. It just leaves us with this final open question to sit with. How can you ever forget something you fundamentally are?